The hero of the first part of the coolest comebacks, Scott Smith, is the first in our top this time. Now he brilliantly finished Pit's cell at the 2006 The Ultimate Fighter. It seemed that Smith tricked the opponent, but as it turned out later, after this blow, 2 of his ribs were broken. But he still found the power for one more attack, which was the last in this fight. Both fighters have already ended their careers and have become great friends, and in one of the interviews, Pete said that even after many years, passers-by still ask him if he is the guy who was knocked out after the liver strike. When it comes to flipping a giant or creating a comeback, the name of Igor Vovchanchyn simply has to be in the top. In the 90s, Igor was one of those fighters who challenged the system and went against the dominance of wrestlers in ultimate fights. And today we have in our program Igor's confrontation with one of the wrestlers of Hammerhouse team, Nick Nutter, who was the champion of the Ohio state. This battle began in 1997 when the fighters fought in the finals of the knockout tournament in Israel, and for each of them this fight was already the third of the evening. Nick performs a takedown at the beginning of the fight, and then everything follows the Hammerhouse scheme: control on the ground and finishing moves. At first he wasn't very active and just laid Igor, but then Nick accelerated and brought down a hurricane of knees to Vovchanchyn. In addition, Igor got head strikes since there were very few restrictions on blows. Nutter dominated for 24 minutes, but no matter how he beat, he couldn't break Vovchanchyn's spirit. On the 25th minute, Igor slightly improved his position with the help of the net, and resting on his elbow struck a few blows with his head to the nose, after which Nick surrendered. Nose was broken and Nutter was demolished. Apparently Nick realized that this guy couldn't be broken even with a crowbar, since even after 24 minutes of thrashing, instead of giving up, he still believes in victory and delivers such blows. So Igor pulled out that fight purely on psychology, spirit and will to win, and confirmed his unofficial title of King of the Eight. But this confrontation wasn't over. A year later they met again and again in the final of the Vale Tudo tournament in Brazil. By that time Nutter had only one defeat in his career. Therefore, he was very determined to take revenge and become the champion of the Vale Tudo.
Pads, knee protection there, and
oh my God!
huge knee immediately.
Nutter charges in and catches a knee right on the button.
It's over.
Igor understood that Nick's first action would be to dive to his feet, since his arsenal was extremely limited. He met Nutter with his knee and finished in the first seconds of the round. With this heavy knockout, Igor put an end to the fights with Nick, and apparently changed something in the fighter himself, since this fight was the last for Nutter in his career. He decided not to fight anymore and hung up his gloves on a nail. In addition to steep comebacks, Igor had another weakness to mock the giant. Pride 27 tournament, and the rival is Dan Bobish, nicknamed the Bull, a footballer and knockout punching wrestler who trained under Dan 7 and was also a bodyguard and sparring partner of Mike Tyson.
なにわの夜にこのボブチャンチンの大砲復活なるか。試合開始のゴングです。168キロ防御男爵。
The Bull dived on legs and took Igor down, after which hard times came for Vovchanchyn in the literal sense of the word. Dan controlled and beat Igor on the ground, and his knees, which he launched from side control, looked especially scary. The Bull was too big and heavy, so Igor couldn't throw him off and stand to his feet. But he wasn't lost. Vovchanchyn used Sapp's scheme, although he was definitely not going to give up. While Dan was ramming his opponent into the canvas, he was noticeably tired, and at the end of the first round he lost all his heroic power, so Igor had to get up and take the bully warm. In the second round, Dan had no more power to take Igor down, and it was time for vendetta. After sprawling, Vovchanchyn threw his knees to the top of Dan's head and then conducted a crash course, taming the bull with kicks and made Dan lie on his back, taking on the role of the victim. Judging by these frames, Dan no longer wants to fight, but he also considers giving up unacceptable. He just lies on the canvas and waits for Igor to finish him off. Another excellent finish and comeback from Igor Vovchanchyn, who had to take quite a lot of damage, but in the second round he made up what was lost and Dan was finished. By 2002, Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira was the Pride heavyweight champion and number 1 in the world's heavyweight rankings, a real machine of comebacks and submissions, which had already run over Herring, Coleman, Goodridge and Anson Inoue when moving to Pride. At the Pride Shockwave tournament, the Japanese decided to pull off an interesting scam and brought the champion to Bob Sapp, who at that time hadn't yet lost all fights, but really wanted to make a career as a fighter. In addition, the beast charged with a complex of bio-yogurts was very dangerous, so much dangerous that the Minotauro asked the organizers to exclude knees on the canvas in this fight.
Sapp in the white trunks, and Nogueira shoots for the takedown! Oh! No! Goodbye!
Bob immediately decided to surprise the audience and end the fight with a unique technique, namely to push Nogueira's head inside, like a big turtle that rolled Bob around the ring all evening. The Beast, with the help of his heroic power and bio-yogurts, tormented the champion and beat him on the ground for the whole round, forcing Nogueira to fully activate the survival mode. So in the confrontation between brute animal power and technique, the power was taking a confident dominant victory. It seemed that Bob was capable of an upset, but unfortunately his gas tank soon ran dry and it was time for retribution. Nogueira, having endured everything that the opponent offered him, played his favorite armbar and ended the most difficult fight in his favor. This is how the seemingly obvious underdog Bob Sapp drank a lot of the champion's blood and made Nogueira's corners turn grey, and also showed those who consider him a weakling and a coward that at one time he entered the ring and fought for real. In 2003, Nogueira lost for the first time in Pride and lost the belt to Fedor, after which he was very eager for revenge. But besides him was Mirko Cro Cop with his bright fights and wild knockouts who forced the organizers to bring him to the champion. So in Pride there was one champion and two clear contenders, and it was impossible to go out at once into the ring and fight for the belt, at least officially. This difficult situation was resolved by itself when Fedor was injured and couldn't fight. Then a fight for an interim belt was organized between the Minotauro and Cro Cop, and the winner would have fought with Fedor for the unification of the belts. For Nogueira, it all started in the best traditions of his best fight. He was on his back and a typhoon of blows from Mirko fell on his face.
There's a straight left again, that's obviously hurt him, and now watch this killer instinct.
In a stance, not very pleasant situation for Nogueira only worsened, as Cro Cop launched a total destruction mode and with the help of his homing torpedoes was smashing Rodrigo. Cro was cutting down attempts to move the fight down and was beating Nogueira over and over again. At the end of the round, Nogueira was close to oblivion after Mirko's foot found his head, but Rodrigo was lucky that the gong sounded and Mirko had no time to finish it off. During the break, the operator began to flirt with the audience and snatch Fedor into the lens, realizing who would be his next opponent, since very few people believed that Nogueira would be able to turn the tide of this fight. In the second round, Rodrigo immediately went ahead and managed to transfer Mirko to the canvas. With these actions, he noticeably revitalized the crowd, since such turning points are always perceived very emotionally.
That's the part. There's the boss bump. Look out, Armbar. It's over.
Nogueira sat down in a mount and began to strike, returning Mirko a favor. When Cro tried to get to his feet, he fell into the signature submission of the Minotauro and was stopped. So for Nogueira, armbar was his best friend and defender, which he used in any incomprehensible situation, and this incredible fight and Antonio's comeback was named Fight of the Year by MMA Fighting. In 2009, Bellator hosted the first ever lightweight Grand Prix of the promotion, and one of its participants was the current BMF champion of the UFC, Jorge Masvidal, who quickly knocked out Nick Aguilar at the first stage and got to Toby Imada in the semi-finals. Jorge worked well with the jab, sometimes connected the right one, and even had the same knee towards him, but the package didn't reach the adversary. Despite the fact that Toby tried to work as number one, Masvidal's jabs became a big problem for him, and Jorge just took him apart for the whole round. At the beginning of the second round, Imada caused trouble for Jorge by bringing his right to the target, but then the picture leveled off and Jorge took the initiative again. So the second round remained with him. The payoff of this fight came in the third round. At the end of the round, Toby made a takedown, and while Jorge got to his feet, Imada managed to close the reverse triangle. Seconds later, Masvidal fell asleep a little and Toby Imada celebrated a great comeback, ending the fight with a spectacular submission and becoming the second Grand Prix finalist. This rather rare submission is probably remembered by many, since it became a real decoration of all highlights, and in 2009 it was recognized as the sub of the year by many MMA publications. By 2010, Bigfoot Silva was a real force in the heavyweight division. By that time, he was the champion of Extreme Combat and Cage Warriors and had a record of 14-2, while he won most of his victories ahead of schedule. At the Strikeforce Henderson Babalu 2 tournament, Bigfoot was supposed to fight Valentine Overeem, but he was dismissed due to injury and was replaced by Mike Kyle, who was also in a good shape and hadn't lost 6 fights in a row.
You ready?
In the first seconds of the round, Mike drops Silva and then follows him to the ground to take Bigfoot's soul. He rams Brazilian into the canvas with devastating punches throughout the first round, but Silva holds the punch as if he's walking in the park, and Mike doesn't particularly bother him to enjoy the walk. So, having a solid advantage, Kyle wasn't still able to finish off the Brazilian giant. Second round, Silva hits Mike's head with a right and then takes him to the ground and goes for the anaconda. He couldn't complete the submission and let go of Kyle's head, for whose health it would have been safer to just fall asleep. Bigfoot at his peak was just a beast when it comes to finishing moves on the ground. He takes full mount and starts a ruthless execution. And this is Sakuraba's style from Silva, who delivers some incredible guns with his shovels and hammers Kyle into the trash in the 3rd minute of the second round. Bigfoot's cool comeback will make another legendary and loud victory in his next fight, will smash Fedor on the ground in the same way, which will be his biggest achievement in his career. Bellator 218 tournament and Anatoly Tokov's duel with Gerald Harris, who was called the King of Slams, and here I think explanations are superfluous. Anatoly decided not to force event and test the strength of Harris's liver, charging dense middle kicks, mixing them with savory and soulful single punches. Harris strikes a single blow which seemed to him just killed Tokov and the referee would have to intervene. But he either showed coolness or simply bargained for the moment and Anatoly came to his senses. At least it seemed to me that Harris treated Tokov with his own hands. Anatoly not only got better, he got to his feet and managed to recover in a clinch. And soon the first round was over. In the second segment, Harris decided to repeat his trick with turning off Tokov, but Anatoly was now on the alert. He responded with a combination of punches and then took the guillotine and made a steep comeback. In 2010, one very curious fight took place in the not-so-popular Shock Fight organization. 2 decommissioned UFC fighters launched a brutal firefight. It was a meeting between Remy Thierry Sokaju and Houston Alexander, and each of the fighters had the nickname the Assassin. The beginning of the round turned out to be really calm, and apart from a couple of low kicks, the audience didn't really see anything. In the middle of the round, Sokaju drops Alexander and begins to hit him with a long series of punches. He escapes in a clinch, but even here a fiasco awaits him, since Sokaju takes the opponent down and continues beating. All these blows seem to have hurt more not even Alexander but Sokaju, who while beating his opponent lost all his powers. In the second round, Alexander began with powerful power jabs, which got to Sokaju's head as on schedule, and then he made a long and painful combo of 30 strikes and finished the tired opponent. Quite a bright fight and unpredictable outcome, and for this fight Alexander received 2 bonuses, at once for a knockout and a fight of the night. And if anyone doesn't know, this guy is a single father who raised 6 children, while in 2000 he donated 1 kidney to his daughter. Great respect for such things. On this funny note, the second comeback review is coming to an end. Write down which fights you liked the most and whether you would like to continue. Also send fights to continue, subscribe to the channel, like, and don't forget about the bell so as not to miss new episodes.